We rarely think about it, right? You flip a light switch or order a package online, and it just happens. But today, we are looking at a scenario that is as fascinating as it is urgent. Welcome to this explainer. We're going to explore the absolute structural foundations of our modern world and what actually happens when the very resource that keeps the whole shebang running suddenly becomes scarce, expensive, and, frankly, unstable. We are talking about the profound, sweeping consequences of a global oil shock. If you want to understand how interconnected our modern reality truly is, well, you're in exactly the right place.
Okay, let's dive into this. What if, tomorrow morning, the world just woke up to an energy panic so severe that markets simply froze? No warning. Just imagine the scenario where fuel stations literally run dry, airlines are canceling routes by the minute, and every single nation dependent on transport and trade feels this massive economic blow at the exact same moment. We're not just talking about a commodity moving up and down on a price chart here. We're talking about a full-blown global emergency, where families and governments alike are looking around asking one terrifying question: how expensive will life become now?
Section 1. The Sudden Energy Panic, a Global Emergency.
Oil is, quite literally, the invisible bloodstream of our modern economy. And because of that, just look at the sheer speed of how a shock unfolds. It's incredibly fast. At hour 1, traders see a supply risk. Maybe it's a blockade, a war, or an accident, and futures markets immediately react in panic. Within just 24 hours, news anchors are repeating the exact same alarming headlines, broadcasting that uncertainty directly into every living room. By hour 48, energy ministers are holding emergency meetings, and central banks are scrambling to assess the threat. And within just 1 week, ordinary drivers are paying the price right there at the pump. The panic of traders translates instantly into a real-world global emergency.
But why does it move so incredibly fast? Well, because oil connects the world through physical reality. Products don't just magically appear on store shelves, as much as we'd like them to. Every single step, from mining raw materials to processing, refining, packing, shipping, and storing, it all costs energy. Oil is the key input behind that entire massive chain.
Section 2. The cost of everything. Inflation strikes.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the chain reaction known as the second-round effect. It's not just about energy being expensive. It's the psychology of inflation. You see, if people expect prices to keep rising, they behave completely differently. They buy sooner, they save differently. This expectation actually infects the entire economy, making the economic math much, much worse.
Let's walk through exactly how this vicious cycle infects the system step by step. Step 1, transport costs rise. Step 2, to survive those costs, businesses hike their prices just to protect their margins. Step 3, now everyday life is more expensive, so workers, understandably, demand higher wages just to survive. And finally, step 4, central banks find themselves completely trapped. It's a brutal lose-lose scenario. If they raise interest rates aggressively to fight this inflation, they risk causing widespread unemployment and recession. But if they do too little, inflation completely destroys purchasing power. And this is the absolute nightmare scenario for financial policymakers, summarized perfectly right here. You cannot simply print more oil. Central banks, they can print money, sure. They can adjust interest rates, but their financial tools are utterly constrained by harsh physical realities. You simply cannot lower global oil production by decree and expect prices to stay normal. It just doesn't work that way.
Section 3. Choking the Supply Chain. Invisible Inputs.
And this brilliantly illustrates how the victims of an oil shock go way, way beyond just everyday drivers in their cars. If we break down the industries heavily reliant on these invisible oil inputs, commercial aviation operates on incredibly thin margins as it is, so an oil shock means higher ticket prices and canceled routes almost immediately. Industrial agriculture, it relies heavily on diesel and petroleum-based fertilizers. Chemical manufacturing requires oil as a direct feedstock for things like plastics and packaging. The squeeze happens across all these invisible inputs, crushing the margins for farmers, airlines, and factory owners alike. It really all boils down to this. Oil does not need to sit on your shelf to affect what you pay for your shelf. Retailers that rely on just-in-time logistics are going to face massive shipping rate hikes and fuel surcharges. And inevitably, they pass those costs right on to consumers. You and I absorb the cost of that expensive fuel every single time we buy electronics, clothing, or even packaged foods.
Section 4. Shifting Global Power. Winners and Losers.
The geopolitical contrast here is incredibly sharp. On one side, oil importers face a truly devastating plight. If they have weak currencies, the bill is even heavier because remember, oil is priced in dollars. This leads to massive debt and potential social protests. But on the flip side, oil exporters experience this massive strategic windfall. Their national revenues surge, which gives them immense diplomatic bargaining power and heightened geopolitical leverage. Alliances start to strain, and securing an energy supply suddenly becomes the absolute center of a nation's foreign policy.
And while wealth can definitely soften the blow, absolutely no one is immune. Wealthy countries might have a cushion, strategic reserves and access to credit, but they still face intense public anger when that heating bill arrives, alongside sticky inflation and serious market volatility. Meanwhile, emerging markets face a much steeper cliff. With limited buffers and weaker currencies, an energy shock quickly escalates into severe trade imbalances, budget crises, and serious political destabilization. The global economy is simply too interconnected for any single nation to hide from the shockwave.
Section 5. The real human cost. Everyday impact.
Let's move to and see how this builds. Let's drop the macroeconomic perspective for just a moment, because behind every one of these charts is a mother trying to afford groceries that just jumped in price. It's a truck driver spending way more just to stay on the road, a farmer paying more for the diesel to run their equipment, a small restaurant owner suddenly worried if they can even afford their food deliveries. It's even the central banker, awake late at night trying to solve an impossible inflation puzzle. The shock might feel abstract when you see it in the news, but it is incredibly real at the kitchen table.
Because when basic human needs like warmth, movement, and food are threatened, it generates profound daily stress. And stress changes behavior. It changes politics. It changes the very rhythm of society. The invisible wiring of civilization begins to strain, turning consumer frustration into a highly dangerous political force.
Section 6. Crisis or catalyst, forcing innovation.
So where do we actually go from here? Well, history shows us that pain can force innovation. An oil shock of this magnitude acts as a massive wake-up call, forcing governments and businesses to frantically diversify their energy dependence so this doesn't happen again. Suddenly, electric vehicle adoption accelerates. Investments in public transport become absolutely urgent. Governments rapidly scale renewable energy projects, and everyday citizens start investing in home insulation and heat pumps. Businesses seriously look at industrial electrification to avoid being so vulnerable to the next fuel spike.
So, the crucial point is this. While a transition to a more resilient system is entirely possible, it cannot happen overnight. You can't just rebuild global transport, logistics, and manufacturing instantly. Society becomes trapped between its current dependence on oil and the slow, grinding reality of building a new energy foundation. The gap between crisis and transformation is exactly where the pain lives.
Which leaves us with one final, profound question to consider. Will humanity move from dependence to resilience before the next shock arrives? An oil shock reveals the deep, deep fragility of our modern life, reminding us just how much we take the hidden wiring of our civilization for granted. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. I really hope this deep dive has given you a clearer, structured understanding of exactly how an energy shock ripples across our entire world. Until next time, keep questioning the systems that surround us.